Hi guys, back with another episode with Love Solé. And this is going to be kind of an offshoot of last week because we had a question come in last week that I thought was really helpful to kind of continue the conversation about things ending. The question came in from Tanvir and she asked, how do you keep your heart open and remain non-attached? A lot of what I spoke about in the last video was sort of remaining non-attached, the fact that kind of all things end, and the more you just allow things to shift and transform and end and do what they do, the more you can kind of meet them even on a deeper level. But of course, insert this sort of human reality that it can be difficult to remain, we'll say, non-attached and keep your heart open, knowing that endings are always possible. And, there's always this sort of impending doom of things ending. I mean, the truth that, as I spoke about in the last video, is that all things end. I mean, literally every person transitions one day, all relationships transition either with that transition or in some other capacity, all situations, circumstances, scenarios, like everything ends. And so the key then is to, I think, move actually with an open heart and let your non-attachment come from your open-heartedness, that like you love so completely and you love reality so much that you allow it to change. I think that true love, true open-heartedness, true connection is freedom to change. That's something that my mother really taught me in my relationship with her. She loved me so much that it didn't matter if I wanted to be a marine biologist today and a ballerina tomorrow. Like, she was down. She let me change and she watched me change and she allowed me to change. She facilitated my own transformation. And that to me was like the richest form of love, because I didn't feel like I needed to stay in a certain way for her to love me in that way. She remained open to my shifting and changing so that I could become who I'm here to be. And her love was just sort of the umbrella under which I could do whatever I wanted to do and feel safe to do it. And I think that's a really important code for all of us, is just that true non-attachment actually is open-heartedness. The difference is if you have a fear and that fear is what's deciding your attachment or not to something, then if you don't have an attachment, or if you do, it's written by fear, right? So it's either that you're attached or then detached, which is very different than non-attachment, because non-attachment means you can still connect deeply. You're still completely open to all things as they are and as they transform. Detachment says, I'm going to actually protect myself from this thing in fear of it ending or it being what I'm used to, or X, Y, and Z. And that's a big differentiation here, because I think it's important to challenge ourselves to remain open-hearted in the face of things that we know may not last forever, and to not shut down or shut off, because fear and love are actually this on the same energetic spectrum. It's like fear over here and love over here, right? And we think it's love and hate, but it's actually fear, because fear compromises your heart space. Fear shuts down your heart space. It collapses you energetically. It closes you down. And so you're a much smaller version of who you are than when you're just in that big, loving, big, open-hearted, big angel energy. And from that space and that space only, from that big open-hearted space, can you actually be non-attached? Because it doesn't mean I'm not going to love this thing in fear of it ending. I'm not going to connect to you deeply in fear that one day this might transform into something else. I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z in fear of anything, because I don't have the fear underwriting my story. So I think to shift from detachment, closing off, to non-attachment, big open-heartedness, and allowing, you have to kind of meet your relationship to fear, and meet what drives fear in your life. And the truth is, for most people, the underlying theme that drives fear in their life is fear of death. And I highly encourage anybody to make peace with their fear of death, both for yourself and for the world, because the truth is everything dies, if you will. In the 3D reality, death is inevitable. It's the birth and death are the two things that happen in your life for sure. And, I think if you have not made peace with death on some level in your relationships and with yourself, it's actually really healing. And that was another thing that my relationship with my mom taught me, was like how to make peace with death. Because I walked her home, if you will, and I had to deliberately, on an everyday basis, as that time was happening, make peace with the fact that this was coming to an end, and that didn't mean I loved her any less in those. I mean, I loved her more, and it's almost like, I think that's the shift when you're not moving out of fear. You love more knowing that things come to an end. You love more knowing that things are going to shift and change, and that how it is today may not be how it is tomorrow. And so I can love how things are today, almost more so knowing that it may never be like this again. We're all shifting and changing subtly every single day. Relationships are going to match that. Everything in our life is going to match that. So you almost show up in a different way and more lovingly when you take that on and allow for that shift and change. And meet your relationship to fear and meet your relationship to death. Once you've made peace with your relationship to death, it destabilizes so much fear in your life, because if that's the ultimate fear, then you have the sense of peace where there used to be fear. So once you have that, that's kind of the foundation of most of fear. And then the rest of the things that drive fear will be like past experiences, or this might hurt. If this ends, it might hurt, and feeling fear towards hurt or getting hurt or tragedy. Obviously nobody desires tragedy, nobody desires death, nobody desires those things that we know are going to leave a mark, if you will. But if you know your own spiritual path, you also know that those are some of the things that actually shift and transform you the most. They're some of our very, very best teachers. And so to not avoid anything and to take life as it is in all of its forms and all of the ways that it teaches us softens a lot of fear. And so you're meeting life with this kind of genuine curiosity and availability to all things exactly as they are, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they hurt, even when this is going to suck, like that's going to definitely be a part of the path. And if you don't have any fear around that and you trust yourself, and the core of that then is trusting yourself, because you know that no matter what life brings you, no matter what happens, you'll know what to do. And so there's, I think, a level of even self-security underneath this whole conversation. Because when you trust yourself, it's like you don't even really have to protect yourself. You don't have to move around with the walls in a closed heart, because you can just be available to things as they are and meet them appropriately and energetically in the way that feels good as it is, instead of just having to be walled all the time to protect yourself from hurt or X, Y, and Z, or what you've experienced in the past or whatever else it is. So being really aware of how you're relating to really life itself, but especially say relationships, because I think relationships are one of the very primary places we get attached. And again, there's a lot of nuance in this conversation, and I could go on forever about relationships specifically, because I think it's very healthy, quite frankly, and natural to have some degree of attachment. In fact, if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who's like almost too much non-attached, it feels like any day they could go, there's just no emotional security. And that actually, it takes from being a healthy dynamic, because if you don't have any kind of like, I'm locked in with this person, I know for women especially, we like to have a certain degree of emotional security. In fact, the last guy that like I dated seriously, I would tell him that all the time, and he just had no framework for that. And that was where we would always miss the mark, is I had no emotional security. And I think, a lot of times when people are so spiritual, they will kind of lack that sort of boots on the ground energy in relationship, where the other person just feels really secure. And that if problems arise, you're going to actively work on it. If there comes a time where things are starting to shift and change, and you're starting to wonder if this is a match anymore, there will be conversation after conversation after conversation. You're not just going to get blindsided one day where the person leaves, right? And so I think in order to curtail there being a healthy connection and attachment, if you will, in relationship, it's this understanding and this kind of deeper commitment to the bond itself, and that you're prioritizing the bond itself, that you are actively choosing the bond itself. And if one day comes where you feel like you can't do that, and on multiple days in a row or years in a row, you don't feel like that's possible anymore, there will be conversations had. So it does kind of soften and dissipate the kind of uncertainty on the other end of someone feeling like they can't connect to you deeply because there's like nothing to connect into, because you're just so almost too free-spirited, like there's not this level of certainty that is actually, I think, quite healthy in relationships. So there's a lot of nuance in this conversation, and especially when it comes to relationships. But beyond relationships, what do they say? Attachment is the root of suffering, right? What you attach to, you're going to end up creating suffering for yourself. Because if you're attached to something, and we know that things change every day, then as it is today, and that's where you decide to attach, means that if it's tomorrow and the next day, it's shifting and changing, and you're trying to stuff it into the box of what it was this day and keep it there. As I talked about with my relationship with my mom, you stifle its growth, And so I think a beautiful commitment and a beautiful way to keep open heart and remain non-attached is to commit to growth in general. I think for me, that is like the number one thing I look for in relationships, friendships, and romantic, is a commitment to your own growth, because that's what I'm committed to. And that is how I live my life. And so I'm always transforming. And anybody who's close to me knows, that I need a lot of room to transform. And I'm so committed to that, your commitment to me means that you are also committed to your own growth, and that our bond, the centerpiece of our togetherness, will always be kind of shifting and changing, because you and I are going to always be shifting and changing. And I think it's beautiful. I think that's sort of what you might consider divine union, or conscious relationships, if you will, conscious friendships, is that you're not like marrying this person as they are today and they're not allowed to change. It's that you're marrying both of your commitment to growth and your commitment to the Most High, God, universe, like your highest self. And that you meet there. And so that there's a lot more wiggle room for transformation to happen. And attachment, kind of like, you're like attached and connected to the bond, but you don't need it to be one thing. And of course, when relationships end and things end, it like does hurt. I think that's, breakups, anybody who's been through a breakup, it's like, it can be perilous. Obviously, we all know that. And most people also know, if you're on the other side of that it's one of the best teachers. It really is one of the best teachers. Because you can reflect on the relationship and pull out the gems that it taught you along the way, or the ways that you were connecting in an unhealthy way, or the red flags or anything else that was telling you an ending was coming, and here you were clinging to it, or whatever. There's so much to glean from relationships. They're some of our best teachers, and sometimes they end, and it sucks, when you've connected in with someone for years and so much of your life is connected to this person, like naturally it hurts. Relationship breakups hurt. There's nothing else to say about that. It just is. And we can't avoid that. We can't love people any less because we're afraid that it might hurt at the end. It doesn't mean like, well, let me not love you a little bit less now, because then that little bit less will help me at the end, when I'll love you a little bit less at the end too. Like, you can't do that to yourself. You can't do that to the bond, and you can't do that to the other person. And that is detachment. That's not non-attachment. There's two very different things. Non-attachment says, actually, I love you deeper now, knowing that there's a possibility that this might not last forever, that at the end of this could just be one of the hardest, seasons of my life, because that's can be what breakups are. But it doesn't mean I'm going to love you any less. In fact, I'll love you more, knowing that who you are today will be a little different than who you are tomorrow, and things are always going to be shifting and changing. And so I'm going to keep on showing up and keep on loving you as much as I possibly can. And I think that that's kind of the ultimate theme for remaining non-attached in life. It is not to close down your heart. If your heart is closed down and that's how you stay non-attached, it's not non-attachment. It truly is detachment. And that's a very different thing. That's something you wouldn't want to work through and heal from, because it's not actually a healthy way to move it from a closed heart and closed down energy field and out of fear of what could be and what's happened to you in the past. That's not helpful to you. So if you feel yourself doing that, and you feel yourself leaning more towards detachment than non-attachment, you want to look at that, and you want to practice challenging your tendency to close down and to close off your heart, and to reopen, and to, because a big heart is like what the world needs. It is what everybody needs, and it's what you need. It's what heals the world, the heart space energy. And we don't want to live with a closed heart. Again, it's appropriate to know the valve of how big and open your heart is, and how much when you need to just be a little bit more aware. There's certain scenarios and circumstances where you might not have big open heart energy all the time, and that's appropriate. But if your home frequency is to close your heart, you're really doing yourself a disservice, and you're really doing your energetic form a disservice, because the heart is the centerpiece of you energetically. And so when that's closed, you end up, shifting your energetic signature in a way that is not true to who you actually are. So keeping an open heart ultimately means challenging the fear that writes your story, notice. I mean, sometimes it's like you have to do this in real time. Like when you're coming in with the open heart and then maybe you like somebody and you're like, you find yourself closing, challenge that. Why am I closing? Well, last time I got hurt. Okay, that's fine. If that still affects me, I should probably look at that. I should probably try to heal whatever's left from the last time that I got hurt that's keeping me from being fully open-hearted this time. Or maybe, in my parental relationships, love kind of hurt. Okay, let's look at that. So look at what's causing the fear in your life and start to uproot it and go down to the root of things so that it doesn't write your story anymore. And then be willing to challenge anything else that comes up, the resistance, the doubts, whatever else. It's like the real time activation of your energetic body that happens when you're in love and when you meet life in love. Now, when I say in love, I don't even just mean like in love romantically. I mean like in love with life. Because it's so many times, whether you're going to a job interview and you find yourself kind of closing up because you're scared you might not get it, right? Fear is writing that story. Okay, what are you afraid of? Not getting it. Okay, you don't get it. If you don't get it, does that not just mean it's not a vibrational match? Probably so. Okay, cool. And I think when you start to also see things from that perspective of, is this a vibrational match or not? It softens the blow, because then it's like, well, not every person is going to be your best friend. Not every person is going to be your friend. Not every person is going to be a romantic match. Not every person is going to like you. Not everybody person's going to want to hear what you have to say. Not every person is going to hire you on your interview. And that's a 100% necessary part of life and is driven by the conversation around things being or not being an energetic match. And that not being personal, your self-worth is not tied into this person liking you. And if it is, another perfect opportunity for you to look at something within yourself that says your worth is determined by a stranger liking you, very silly and not important and not necessary and causes a lot of suffering. The approval of others, of course, is something that causes a lot of suffering. And we're not designed for everybody to like us. In fact, we are the medicine in that some will and some won't, and both are the medicine and both are healthy and both are helpful, because what someone doesn't like in you is their thing to work through. And it's not really usually personal, because oftentimes it's just projecting their own stuff onto you and you didn't even get a chance to be yourself yet because they're too busy curating you into somebody that they didn't like. And you can't waste your energy or time doing anything about that, and you wouldn't want to. You're just holding up a mirror for them. And if they are a conscious person who's willing to look at why they feel strongly about you in a dislike regard, that's great. And if not, also great. Doesn't move you or shift you either way. But at the end of the day, that doesn't even mean you close your heart. It just means it's not a vibrational match. And I think when we take that language on, it's going to help so much. Instead of it being this war of like, you don't believe like I believe, you're wrong. Or, people literally go to war over belief systems, and it's problematic. They go to war over political belief systems. They go to war over religious belief systems. They go to war over any system that says, if you don't believe like I do, you're the bad guy and I need to go to war with you. Like, that's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And if we shift the language to it just not being a vibrational match, or wow, you have a different belief system than me, and I might not resonate with that, it may not be something I choose to be around, but it doesn't even make it personal. It just means that energetically we're not a match, and that's fine. That's a true law of the universe, that there will be things that are vibrational matches and there will be things that are not. And the more you vibrate higher, you meet things at a higher level, and also there becomes more and more that's not a vibrational match anymore, because we don't exactly live in a high vibrational world just yet. We are those who are creating that reality for ourselves. And so we have to be willing to not be a vibrational match for people. And then, higher and lower it's kind of, it's hard. It's a hard distinction. I don't even like that language really, because you're just vibrating bigger, really, ultimately. You're vibrating in authenticity. You're vibrating as yourself more and more and more as you transform on your path. And some people will match with that and some people will not. So it's not really higher and lower than them. It's just you in the frequency that's hums from your being, and that some people are going to be attracted to that and some people are going to be repelled by that, and both are fine. That's just the nature of the universe. It's not personal, and the less you take that personally or try to get everybody to vibrate towards your hum, the better you are, because then you can just allow the forces of the universe to do what they do and allow things to come and go from your reality. And that is non-attachment, because the bigger you are means that you're more in your heart space energy. The more it means that your heart is open. It means that you are love embodied, which is like the ultimate Jesus code, right? It's like the ultimate ascended master code. It's the ultimate angel code. It's the ultimate being yourself code, is that you have an open heart, and there's so many parts of our reality that are designed to close off your heart because of its power. That's why fear is one of the most used spiritual warfare techniques, because it closes the heart and it keeps you from being your full energetic self. And so the reclamation of your full energetic self is an open heart to all things as they come and as they go, and meeting them as they are, and trusting that if it's a vibrational match, it will remain. That's also like a part of the laws of the universe. Like what vibrates with you will be able to remain. If something is trying to go and you're clinging to it because you're afraid you're going to get hurt, you're really just, avoiding the inevitable, that the hurt may happen. And if you don't avoid hurt and you trust that the hurts that come into your life are only here to teach you, and you're willing to learn from them, even when they do hurt, even when it's uncomfortable for weeks on end, you don't even know yourself in your world, a bomb has gone off in your world, it is no less of an invaluable teacher. It is no less an invaluable teacher. And so I think being willing to enjoy the highs and the lows of life, and enjoy the, times of absolute euphoria and bliss, and the times that we'll call mastership, the bottom of the barrel, the tower moments, the dark nights of the soul, they're always going to be a part of the path. And if you resist and try to avoid and try to stop that from happening, you're not living your life. You're not. So a commitment to the living of your own life, and a commitment to remaining open-hearted despite all circumstances, to the degree that that's healthy and helpful, and a commitment to the law of the universe, that things will be a vibrational match and other things will not be. And some things are a vibrational match for time, and then they're not a vibrational match anymore. And a willingness to do commit to the things that matter to you, and especially when it comes to other people, because you don't want to be that person that nobody can hook into in terms of a healthy, committed relationship. But also, there's grace there for the bond to say, when things come up, I'm going to address them. And if I start to feel like something's not working here, we're going to talk about it until we can either get it to start working, or we can reassess what's going on here, so you're not just leaving people feeling, like they have nothing to commit to. There's still the stability and the groundedness of you being human and someone being able to connect with you deeply. And there's not the fear of loss, or, the non-willingness to transform together and to let the bond transform. So that's what I'm going to give you around this. I hope this helps. I feel like I kind of went in many different directions with it, but I think ultimately you get my point here. Open-heartedness and non-attachment are one and the same. And so if you find yourself closing your heart, ask it why, and look at what keeps you from being open-hearted and connecting with people, and what fears you have. Like, start to just address anything that kind of collapses you energetically in any regard, but especially when it comes to the heart, because the heart is the one place where it's like kind of where a lot of your inner child lives, and just the vulnerability and the like sweetness and the intimacy of just being like in that very deep space of who you are. And so it can be easy to close down in that way. And we don't want to do that. And we don't want to let life do that to us, whether it's, struggling with our parents or our family, or past relationships that didn't work out, or friendships that crashed and burned. It happens. It happens. And it's not wrong or right. It just is that it happens. And so when you can allow for that, and not grasp and clasp at things, and let just your hands remain open to all that's yours, and what's yours will just stay. It'll stay without you needing to grasp onto it. And it creates a lot more ease and flow in your life when you're not clinging to things, and when you can just allow what's yours to vibrate in and stay for as long as it can. And then if it needs to vibrate out, you'll decide that then, So that's what I've got. I hope that helps. Thank you all again, as always, for all of your support. I've got my Soulful Remedies over here. As I mentioned last time, we've just launched a bunch of new products. I'm so excited about them. I've been trying them all myself, and they're so awesome. I have such faith in this brand and what we're doing and what we're building. So go ahead and check it out and let me know what you think. Let me know whatever other questions you have. Thanks, y'all, for always providing questions and helping me kind of decide what to touch on and what you guys want to hear about. Please always do that. And I will see you next time.